This panel needs no introduction, but let me do it anyway. So first we have with us Chief Amanda Behan of the Winchester Police Department. Next to her, it's Sheriff William Sales of the Winchester City Sheriff's Office. Then it's Chief Deputy Tricia Putnam of Clark County Sheriff's Office. And last but not least, Sheriff Lenny Mullholland, Frederick County Sheriff's Office. Welcome, everyone. It's so good to have you with us. And again, thank you for taking time out today to talk to us about the issue of domestic violence and abuse and sexual violence and abuse here in our area of the Valley, and to talk about the Laurel Center and its importance and its important role in dealing with this. We really do appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a series of questions to ask, and we'll begin with how many domestic violence calls did you respond to in 2023, and how many so far in 2024? Lenny, why don't you start us off?
In 2023, the Frederick County Sheriff's Office handled 617 domestic assault calls, but there were actually 110 physical assaults. And then in 2024, we responded to 181 calls, and there were 22 actual assaults.
All right.
In 2023, in Clark County, we had 98 domestic calls. Of those 98, 30 to 32 involved actual assaults. For 2024, we so far have had 24, and about 6 of those involve actual assaults.
And Amanda?
Yes.
How about Winchester?
Yes. So in 2023, we responded to 189 domestic assaults, and in 2024 so far, 43 domestic assaults.
Sheriff Sales, you've got some broader statistics for us. Can you share those?
Yes, I'd like a few national statistics. I got this information from the National Domestic Violence Hotline website. This kind of opens my eyes to a lot of stuff. It says an average of 24 people per minute are victims of rape, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner in the United States. More than 12 million women and men in one single year. So that's kind of staggering.
That's astonishing.
Yes. Every minute, 24 people are victims.
Wow. And it just really does give you an idea of the scope of what we're dealing with and the problem that we're dealing with. So based on the statistics that you have for your jurisdictions, do you think that domestic and intimate partner violence, is it on the increase? And how about sexual assaults? And if it is, what's behind it? What do you think that might be? Who'd like to take that question to start?
I will be happy to start with that. I don't know that this is something that we're ever going to really know whether or not it's increasing, decreasing, because certainly there are so many domestic violence incidents that occur that go unreported to us. But typically we are seeing about the same amount each year and a slight increase from year to year.
All right.
And one of the main things you got to keep, and I know a lot of the people here today will say, those are just the numbers you see. So what about the unreported numbers? And you can get into that, and where are those statistics? You're not going to have them.
And Chris, as far as Frederick County, the sexual assaults in 2023, we had 42 of them, and so far in 2024, we've had 21.
Oh,
so
that's a definite increase.
You know, so the listeners try to get a perspective of it. A lot of it is interpretation at the time that it occurs, and when we get there, what's reported to us, and then, you know, everybody has their day in court, so a lot of times things like that can change, and, you know, depending upon what the court says as to what happened, what witnesses say as to what happens, you know, somewhere along the line that would be reduced or could be reduced. So these aren't hard, fast, that's how many really happened, because, as they say, there's always two sides to every story. But the Laurel Center has always been there to help in the event, you know, that we have to arrest the aggressor when we go to our calls. Mm-hmm. And if the victim doesn't have a place to go, that's when we would call the Laurel Center to see if we could find placement for them.
How about in Clark County?
In Clark County, I would say that our numbers stay fairly stagnant course, you always have variations. During the COVID years or coming out of the COVID years, we saw an increase, and a lot of that had to do with the lockdown. A lot of things were not reported. And again, having the Laurel Center and that resource available with counseling and just those types of outreaches, it's really important.
All right, so I'd like to move to the next question, which is what is an important factor or maybe factors that makes domestic and sexual violence cases different than most other crimes?
I'll take that one
Okay,
first.
saw your face light up.
Well, one of the things is we're told a lot of times that it's strangers that we should be wary of. And in domestic and sexual violence, it has been my experience, it's the people closest to you, unfortunately. One of the things that we need to do better at with our children is teaching them self-esteem and to have a trusted individual that they can go to, because a lot of this starts at the childhood level.
Anyone want to add to that?
Yeah, it's the family component. Oftentimes this incident may involve children. In addition to that, it's the services that have to go around calls for service like this. It's not, we walk away, we make the charges. There's a lot of trauma that occurs in these types of cases.
So I know that I've interviewed the folks from Laurel Center for a very long time as well, for years now. How do the victims end up at Laurel Center? Do you take them there? Do you recommend that they call? How is that? Is it a reference? How is that happen?
It's all the above, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
It all depends upon when we get there, to what extent. If they have nowhere to go, we'll call the Laurel Center. As I say, I've stated earlier, I've been associated with what used to be the Shelter for Abused Women, which is now the Laurel Center since 1981. So over the years, and I don't want to age myself, but they have been a beneficial need, all those years for people who are in domestic violence or who have been assaulted domestically by their significant other, and they have accepted them with open arms.
So domestic and sexual violence are considered highly prevalent. We know that. They're still the most underreported and dismissed crimes. Based on your experience, why do you think that might be? Why is that? And do you have any thoughts on how we might, as a community, help change that?
Sure. I think as far as from the community perspective, we need to reduce the stigma surrounding domestic violence and sexual assault. We need to rally around the services that are provided in the city, such as the Laurel Center. And as far as why it's underreported, I think oftentimes victims can feel ashamed of what's occurred. They're embarrassed by what's occurred, and it's difficult to talk about, especially when it comes to sexual assault and rape.
Anyone else?
What? Go ahead.
And
Sheriff.
it also includes a lot of times children, in the fact that, either side will say, look at what you're doing to our kids and everything else. And they throw different things into the equation. And, these are things that we have to look at when we get there. And, a lot of times the Laurel Center can tell these people what to look at and what to look for and how to best move forward.
Anyone else with a
One
thought?
of the other things that makes it so difficult for victims to come forward, these are people that often they live with. This is their support system, family. And as Chief Behan pointed out, the stigma, the embarrassment, those are all things. You have various family members, asking you not to have someone arrested for this. Your children are often, as Sheriff Mullholland said, they're seeing this, they're crying, they're traumatized. And you just don't want to put your family through that.
It seems like it's a sticky trap.
It is, and oftentimes we respond, and the abuser is the victim's lifeline to providing them with a home or food on the table. So leaving that situation is going to be very difficult.
And then, all these things, come into play here. But then if you think about just the main reason, the whole thing about domestic assault and intimidation, they're scared. They're afraid. They're afraid of repercussions. What's going to happen if I report this? Once he gets out of jail, he's coming back. So this is why places like the Laurel Center can provide that safe haven. Police departments, Winchester Police, Frederick County, Clark County, we can help them, assist them with protective orders to protect them from that. But then again, that's a piece of paper. I've heard victims say that. What's going to stop him from coming back? That's a piece of paper. They're scared.
And I personally don't know how many times that we've gone and there's been an aggressor, and when we've hooked the aggressor up to take them, we have now had to fight the significant other, because the significant other realized that when we're taking them, they're not going to go to work tomorrow, and 9 chances out of 10 they could lose their job, and it completely changes to the point where we're dealing with that issue at that point. So, sometimes you're in a catch-22, but that's the reason, thank goodness, the Commonwealth has said you take the aggressor. So
that is the law.
that helps. Yeah.
That's good to know. It is, again, a sticky situation.
It is.
And you can't, I try to empathize for them, and luckily for me, I've never been in that situation,
Right.
but I think about how much is really at stake there when you say lifeline, provider, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. And it's got to be so frustrating for you when you go to try and remove the aggressor. But I guess the law says that's what you do now,
Right.
so that takes that out of the equation,
And,
the frustration.
we have to be neutral. So, to pick the aggressor, a lot of times that's difficult to pick the aggressor.
Yeah.
But, I think overall we do a really good job.
So what is an important factor or factors that makes domestic and sexual violence cases different from most other crimes? I think we've talked about a little of that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So is there anything else you'd want to add, or should we move on to the next question?
It's just the emotional trauma. For a lot of people, this may be their first time interacting with law enforcement. It's the first time that they've reported it. They don't know what to expect. It's just very fraught with uncertainty, and that causes its own stress. So as law enforcement officers, and I know that Sheriff Mullholland is well aware of this, I think we're probably two of the more seasoned. But back in the day, you had that where a law enforcement officer, this is a family matter and we're not getting involved. So we have trained, and we do CIT training, and we try to make our officers and deputies more empathetic and to understand that this, more so than most other crimes, has a greater emotional impact. And again, because this is your family. These are people you know and love and don't want bad things to happen to.
You have to have taken some of these cases home with you in your head. Are there, I can't imagine how you must feel when you go in to that situation, knowing that, well, you have an idea of what you're going to find, and then not knowing what you're going to find, and then seeing what happens, and especially when kids are involved. Has it changed the way you do your job? Has it changed the way you think about your job, or the responsibility to the community? I know that this is off the page, but I'm curious.
I have actually had kids come up to me and say, last Friday one of your deputies was at my house. My father or my significant other was hitting on my mother or on my father, and your guys took him to jail. And thank you. I mean, they literally have thanked us. But, their concept of what happened, and in the real world, what the husband or wife or significant other is looking at is completely different than the view of the child. So, you know, you do have positives, but then again, you have negatives because they've seen that law enforcement officer take their mom or dad or whoever to jail. So
I think, Chris, for me, you ask about the impact. When you're asking me that question, I immediately start thinking about cases that, that have haunted me, that I wish had different outcomes, that it rocks you when you are, especially with children. And it changed me a lot after having my own children and thinking about a child going through something of the nature that we have to investigate.
And along with that, even if the arrest is a good arrest, you arrest the primary aggressor, you stop the violent act from happening. What I found, I think about when I worked a lot of domestics and when I went home, the kids the next day, now they got to go to school. That kid's not going to have sleep. I've looked into it more. Those kids have horrible grades. Those kids are at school fighting. But so just because the domestic's over that night, it doesn't stop. The effects continue and they continue. And that's why, speaking of the Laurel Center, we host a thing every month at the courthouse where there's court-ordered effects of domestic violence classes, where it's court-ordered and the parents have to come and they have to go through a class and say, okay, it's just not affecting you. What are you doing to your kids? You know what I mean? And it's court-ordered every month, and we do it. I love it. The Laurel Center comes down. The judge court orders them there. And as a sheriff, I sit in the class myself. I actually did do that. So,
are light bulbs going off during that meeting? Do you see them?
You can see, and you hope it is. I can see, and you can tell there's some people that are, obviously good people, and things went wrong, and they want to do something different. So, you know what I mean? Then you also see some that they're coming to the class because the judge told them to.
So the next question that Faith had for me was, as law enforcement officers, you no doubt have responded to domestic or sexual violence calls in your career. How did you feel about responding to these types of calls? What were your concerns? Was safety a concern for either yourself or the victims? Have we handled all that, or is there something in there that you'd like to discuss?
Just short and sweet, Chris.
Yes.
Every one of those calls can be a violent situation for the officer that's responding. When you get there, things can go south rather fast. And a lot of it just depends upon the mindset of the people that are in the house and what their thought is when law enforcement first pulls up. And that can change completely. And we've had across the country where, police officers have been shot at because they're here to do something.
Yeah.
And, it's stressful for the officer and then us as the administrators, knowing that our people are going out and dealing with that stuff. So,
yeah, if someone is capable of abusing a spouse or a child, then what's going to hold them back from, attacking an officer?
Do your officers have any sense that when they do answer a domestic violence call, that it's the most dangerous call that they could be responding to?
I think each of us at the table here can remember very significant incidents in which domestic violence calls led to officers being attacked, injured, even killed.
Mm-hmm.
That is so true. And even if there are no weapons in the house when we arrive, sadly, there is a weapon on scene. And if you are responding as a single officer, and as Sheriff Mullholland pointed out, I have been on those where I have been the single officer, and suddenly everybody in the house is coming at you, even the victim, and it will definitely make you think.
When you arrive, are you faced with a rage machine? I mean, look, Hollywood is my best, honestly, but I'm curious because a lot of people, that's the perspective they come from.
A lot of times, Chris, yes.
How terrifying.
Yeah.
You just don't know what you're going to walk into.
And when you knock on the door and nobody answers, and then you have to try to figure out what is behind the door. And then when you do, a lot of times it's, you're in a fight. We've had them where we've responded and heard them screaming and yelling and go in to check on the welfare, and then you're in the middle of a fight. So,
do you find yourself repeatedly going back to the same homes, or not?
we have in Frederick County several times, but a lot of times the court will step in and help. But once again, it has to be both parties agreeing to get back together. And when they do, a lot of times, sometimes it doesn't work out. And then we're back doing it again.
So it's obvious that domestic and sexual violence have had an effect on our community. What do you think the impacts are that you can see? And I'm talking about schools, employers, all the rest of it, right? What is the effect on our community as you see it?
I think part of that, as with anything, there's an economic piece to that. When you are a victim, you can't go to work if you have a job. So that impacts. You have an employer who has an employee that is taking time off for they don't know why, and quite often they don't ask the questions. Children in schools, they're not showing up, they're not getting their education, or they are failing miserably, falling asleep, all of those things. So yes, it definitely has an impact across many facets of our society. But very often, people don't realize that that's the underlying problem, that it's something in the home.
And there's definitely long-term effects to these types of calls. There's studies out there that show trauma, violent trauma, can have long-term effects medically and emotionally on children as they grow older.
Yeah, it's basically like you. If you think about your upbringing from your parents or whoever raised you, what do you do at the table? Do you say grace? Do you say thank you? Do you open doors? Whatever you were taught. Now, what if you were taught, okay, when I'm mad, okay, I'm grabbing somebody and I'm throwing somebody, and this is what I'm doing. Now, what's that kid grow up to be? And that's that vicious cycle later on. When they're adults, what do they do? How do I handle myself in a stressful situation? Do I scream and yell?
So that brings me to the next question, what the impact is on our kids, because they are absolute innocent victims in all of it. And I think everyone who thinks about what we've been discussing, their mind goes to kids and how horrible it must be on them and the deep impacts that it has. And you were discussing that, Amanda. Anybody have, without giving any cases away, but any specifics, being a little more specific about what it can be like?
I was raised by a single mother. And to my knowledge, there was never any issues other than the fact that they just didn't want to live together. So every time that he came around, I always thought in my heart that the two of them would get back together. So a lot of times what happens with these kids is the fact that, you know, when there's fighting and everything else going on under the roof, in their heart, they're thinking that mom and dad are going to get back together and they'll love one another one more time and my life will be perfect. But then, you know, 2 months goes down the road and it doesn't work that way. And then they see it. And then when they go to school, they kind of act out because they want mom's attention or dad's attention. Well, dad's not there because he's living someplace else, or mom's not there because she's living somewhere else. And then the child gets put in the middle of, this is what I think is going to make them come back together, is if I act out or do something. And we see that, and, you know, our SROs and everything else deal with stuff like that. And, you know, these kids genuinely are just reaching out to make sure mom or the significant other, you know, get back together for a normal, peaceful household. And a lot of times it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I want to talk about the opposite point to that, and a situation in a case that I had where I responded to a middle school student, and she was reporting to her guidance counselor that her stepdad had been sexually abusing her for many years. And, you know, social services was involved, developed a safety plan. He was not to be in the house, and by that evening, mom had brought him back into the house. And so now you have a child who doesn't want these two people to be together, and now she can't even trust her mother.
Right, right.
And it comes back to, once again, a child's there. We're supposed to protect them. We're supposed to raise them. We're supposed to teach them. A child doesn't have a choice for what me and you can go home. I can decide to watch TV, hang out, be quiet or not be quiet, go to sleep. A child doesn't have a choice if they're screaming and yelling going on. What choice do they? They have to live there. Us as adults, we can just go where we want to, but we're not realizing that's the effect you have on kids. They have no choice. So if you're not providing a safe, peaceful place.
And a lot of times kids are the pawn. You know, I mean, it's just kind of like, well, you know, if you don't come back, look what it's going to do to Chris if you don't come back. And we see that a lot. And once again, without, you know, talking more about the Laurel Center, you know, they know how to deal with things like that with people that come here, you know, how to get over that thought with your kids. And those are things that we have to look at too.
So when a victim arrives here, this is a soft place to land at the Laurel Center. You've got therapy, but you've also got you'll clothe them, you'll make sure they're well fed, you'll give them all the basic things, the needs that they need to I guess, recenter themselves and get their perspective on their situation so they don't have to worry about meeting the basic needs. And they can worry about healing themselves mentally, healing their children mentally, and I'm expecting possibly physically as well. And that's invaluable to these victims. I mean, we've been talking about it all day, but where else do they go if their abuser was the lifeline, the breadwinner, and now they have no place to go? Their home is where the abuser is in some cases. So that's one big reason why we've got to support Laurel Center. Just have to. And when we take this, we just heard about how many people are affected in each one of these jurisdictions. It's not slowing down. Every person that we had here the experts have been telling us it's staying steady, if not increasing a little bit. So, and funding has been decreasing, Faith says, while demand has been increasing. So just another real reason why we've got to rally as a community and support the Laurel Center. It's an obvious thing, but we need to say it. We need to make people aware of it. So some people believe that domestic and sexual violence is more prevalent in lower socioeconomic levels of our community. And what do you see? What's the reality? You know, as law enforcement, you see it. Is that incorrect?
The reality is that is very incorrect. Domestic and sexual violence is across all socioeconomic. You would think perhaps that it would be more prevalent in lower income families and what have you, but it has been my experience that it's actually far more prevalent in middle and upper class families. Because again, you've got the denial that it's happening because we have standing in the community, we don't want to be embarrassed. So those can be very eye-opening because people do not think of those people as having domestic violence issues.
And when you talk about domestic violence, we're talking about injury and stuff, but domestic assault and whatnot goes beyond that. Withholding money, withholding cars. Okay, you're not going to be able to drive the car now. Now I'm freezing a bank account. I had one person sell the $2,000 dog. Actually, not sell it, just give it to the SPCA because I bought it, so you're not getting it. And that turned into a mess because his name was on the dog, and he's like, just give it away.
Well, we've talked about the great impact that the Laurel Center has for our community and for fragile victims, people who are members of our community, but at the worst point in their life, right? At some of the lowest points in their life, and how they help, and they help families and our community. And what if there was no Laurel Center here for all of those victims? What if there was none? If there was no one there, no Laurel Center to help them, what would these victims do?
Just with the housing piece alone, we've talked about what the Laurel Center provides as far as services, but just the housing piece, we would start with social services, then we would reach out to the different shelters in the area, and we all know that these shelters are at full capacity. I've had officers and myself will open up their own wallets in situations where the criteria wasn't met and have placed a victim in a hotel room.
You said that. Every one of you nodded. Every one of you's nodded. It gets me because I really believe in law enforcement. I think you guys are that wonderful thin blue line. And I believe that you totally love the communities you serve. And you would have to face what you face every day to keep us safe, to keep our community in a good place. But I think this is an excellent example of that, right? You dig in your own wallet to help the folks that are most unfortunate at that moment. But there's no Laurel Center. It's gone. So you're digging your wallet to get them in a hotel? Is that what it is? Where else would you put them? The shelters, like you say, are at capacity. What happens to these families if there isn't someone who's digging out of their own pocket? If there is no room in the shelter? What is the answer to that? What happens to them ultimately?
Chris, I think I said earlier that I've been associated with the shelter, not necessarily the Laurel Center in specific, but the Shelter for Abused Women since 1981. There's no way that I could count on my hands, fingers, toes, and everything else how many people that over that time period that I have taken there.
Yeah.
And if they would not be there, I have no idea what we would do as a community in order to have the counseling, the place for the kids to go, the place for whoever the victim is to go, and what they would do from that point forward in order to try to get their life back to the way it was before the domestic assault or abuse happened.
You talk about the rug being pulled out from under you.
Yeah.
I just want to imagine that you are a victim, right? And imagine now you have been injured. Maybe your children have been injured. You've got to escape the situation. This was someone that you loved, and now that's no longer there. Your stability is gone. Your home might be gone. Maybe the only source of income for your family to feed them and take care of them, gone. In an instant, what are you thinking? What's going through your mind? There's no Laurel Center? Where are you going to go? Are you going to spend the night on the street? Well, you go to the shelter, if you're lucky enough to get in with the whole family. Maybe you're not. Are you sleeping on the streets? Do you have a friend? Have you gone through every friend? How are you going to pay for the cell phone after a month is over? We've got to protect the Laurel Center. We got to make sure they are funded and that they've got the funds to keep operating. Again, these are people who never expected to get into this situation. And I find it interesting that people will disassociate themselves with the victims of sexual assault or domestic assault. That's something that does happen in Hollywood, right? That doesn't happen in my neighborhood. That doesn't happen to people I know. Well, it does, and you might not know about it. We've got to care enough to make sure that they are still funded. We've got to care enough to make sure they can do the good business they do, like you've all been saying, taking care of the children, making sure they've got a soft place to land, a protected place. The new building that they have is brilliant. It's Fort Knox. Those people are safe in that building, and their kids can still go outside and see the sunshine and play and be kids again. And to think that they wouldn't have enough money to operate, I think we can all start to feel exactly what additional impact that would have on our community. So I strongly feel that if you're watching this right now, it would be tremendous to make whatever donation you could make to help the Laurel Center. It's not money that is wasted. Just think of those kids. It could be your sister, it could be your cousin, it could be your brother, because it happens to men as well. Just think about it, and if you can, donate. So we've covered so much, and we could keep talking, I know that. But is there anything else that you would like to add?
The only thing that when you ask the question about where would they go, and I think that it would be important for the community to be aware that we have families in our communities that are living out of their vehicles. So when you say where will they go, they could just be finding a remote place somewhere and with their children in a vehicle and they're living out of it.
Does that happen more often than I would think it does, or is this something?
Yes.
You think? Yep.
Yes, yeah. We have a family that was living out of the back of a U-Haul. Yeah.
I know of a family that is living in a playhouse behind one of the houses on my street. And they don't want to be approached. So I wrote a little note, said, if you need help, here's some places to go, but they know, I'm sure. And I think about them when I think about what we've just been talking about. And I wonder if maybe it was, domestic abuse or violence that caused them.
But people are proud, Chris, and a lot of times people just don't want other people to know what's going on.
Yeah.
When the kids go to school, it's don't tell anybody. And, there are times when you talk to them and they let something slip. But then, I can't speak for everybody that's at the table today, but things like that over my years of doing this really bother me, because nobody needs to be assaulted, nobody needs to be abused. And when you see the kids, there's a lot of them that you can just think to yourself, something's going on.
Well, and as Faith said, and of course, back in the beginning, it was the women's shelter. Of course, like everything else, men have kind of realized that they can be victims too, and it's not quite as stigmatizing to admit that you are a victim. But again, if you have a father that takes his children and leaves, you have the same problems that women have. And again, they are very proud, and a lot of them were raised, you don't want to admit such a thing.
Yeah.
So again, that whole cycle and the trauma and the embarrassment, and as a community and with the Laurel Center, having those resources is so important.
Mm-hmm. And the last thing I have to say is, if you think about it, from our jobs or in your personal life, everyone knows somebody. It's like it's that thing that no one wants to talk about. Everybody knows somebody that's a victim, or knows a family that knows a family, or directly knows somebody has been a victim of some kind of domestic assault or domestic situation. Everybody knows. We all know people. I can go on. My list can go on forever. So let's educate ourselves. Let them know that resources are out here. The Laurel Center has those resources. Even if they're not ready to act on it now, go ahead and educate yourself and see what they all have to offer. So when it's that time, you know what I mean? Because what's the statistic? It's like takes 7 times before someone finally leaves. 7 times.
7 times.
So how about let's get educating right now before it goes to 7 times, and just see if it's for you, and just know you can be safe. You know what I mean? But everyone knows somebody, so it's just we need to get the word out there about the Laurel Center and what they have to offer. And that's it.
Well, I want to thank you all. We know how busy all of you are, and the fact that you could take some time off to come and talk about the importance of the Laurel Center and domestic abuse and violence in our communities today really means a lot, and it says a lot about what you feel about the Laurel Center. It's worth funding, it's worth taking care of, and because they take care of, again, those people who are at their most fragile. And just appreciate you very much. Continue the good work that you all are doing, and thanks so much for joining us today.